bulk of Helmholtz. There might be some more. Check your notes. Make sure you read the chapters. Okay? Remember, while you did well on the last test, that was because of me. You can do better. Okay? So read the chapter. Attend to the terms that are there. The other guy who we could talk about here, who comes from Kant, is Fechner. And while Helmholtz is more of a physiologist, Fechner is more of a physicist. Okay, remember the difference, right? Like, don't get them confused like psychologists and psychiatrists. You know the difference between them, don't you? Right? Psychiatrists make about $360,000 more than I do a year. That's the difference. And they can prescribe drugs. That's the other thing. I have to go and get mine from funny little drugs. Anyway, Helmholtz, a physiologist, physiology of the body. Fechner is concerned with the physics of the world and how we pick up information. And there he was studying, and I'll do this rather quickly without so much of the narrative, but he was studying how that energy from the world around us comes into our body, and he looked at things like the absolute threshold. I'm getting impatient with all this neat writing. Absolute threshold. That's the amount of energy needed for us to see something that's out there. Now notice that what's implicit in studying this is that what's out there is not what is exactly what we respond to. A lot of stuff's out there. Some of it we can respond to, others we can't. So he already knows we're not seeing all the real world the way it really is. We're just seeing what we can see. The other thing he notices and studies is the just noticeable difference, J&D. So you're looking at a light or you're hearing a sound, and all of a sudden it sounds louder. Whatever it was that made it sound louder is the just noticeable difference. And there too, the point is that just having something go up one notch doesn't mean you're going to hear it as louder. In fact, you probably won't. For each sensory system, there's a certain proportion of information or energy that has to come in that will allow us to notice a difference. For light it's something, for sound it's something else. You're not just hearing changes as they occur. You have to hear the right proportion of changes. That formulation is known as Weber's law, which later became known as Fechner's law. Fechner was nice and modest. He first called it after his friend who thought it up, and then later they changed it to Fechner's law. Okay? I know I did that kind of quick, but again, look at your notes, look at the book, read the chapter, process it, and I promise, sometimes you worry out, like, when are you going to ever use this stuff if you learn in school, I promise you'll use it next week, okay? Somebody wanted smart-ass students. How am I going to use this when I have a job afterwards? I said, well, first of all, it'll get you out of the course, which will get you closer to your job. So at the very least, you'll be using this stuff before you leave class. Okay, so now, just as a general comment about these guys, they're not really doing psychology. I mean, they're very close, because they're saying, in a way, that materialism, even though they want to have a mechanistic explanation, is not enough. We have to bring in something like unconscious inference, where we have to explain things beyond what's just present there. One of the things that they often looked at, and this goes back to Kant, were perceptual illusions, because they were good examples of how you sense limited amounts of information, but your head makes a whole picture come together. So for example, and this is an example that's from the book, if I draw two lines that are equal, pretend they're equal, right? But before I show them to you, I add some more information, like this. Okay? In this case, people would walk by and they're very likely to say, well, this one looks bigger than that one. It's not true, but that's what they would say it looks like. Why? Because they're not just seeing the lines, they're also seeing the diagonal lines. And they provide a context which distorts what it is that you see. So you end up making a judgment that's wrong because you think you see in the world, but you're really seeing too much, and you're giving your mind too much information, and it becomes hard to make that distinction. So illusions are there's a whole lot of illusions, actually. If we had the time, I'd go and draw some more for you. I'm not so bad at drawing, actually. But that's one that's in the book. When it's in the book, it actually is presented up here when it's talking about Kant, remember? If you looked at the book. So that's where it is. But it's illustrating the same point. When they talk about this with regard to Kant, they also bring in two other terms that Kant used, which might be good for you to have kind of bouncing around your head. Kant referred to the true reality that's out there as the noumena. That's the truth. But the problem, as he defined it, was we can't get to the truth because we're locked in our body. So everything we see and feel and touch is always going to be slightly distorted by our eyes and ears and skin. So we're not getting at the truth, the noumena. What we're left with is the phenomena, which is the experience. And our experiences are prone to distortion and illusion. And if you want to get the truth, you got to work a little hard at it, right? That's the point. I mean, Kant was a school teacher. So the truth's not going to just hit you in the middle of the head like when God appears to you in the middle of the night. If you want to do it in the human world, you have to work. You have to get out a ruler and measure these two. And if you get out the ruler and are measuring those two lines, then you're using a category of understanding, the one of quantity, and that'll lead you to the truth. Just looking at it first blush, very likely you're going to get a distortion. Okay, so that's chapter 4. Now, chapter 5, I'm ready to go home. My hands are all blue already, is about psychology. Finally, we get to psychology after all this. But, of course, it's not unrelated to all this. It doesn't come out of left field where somebody says, oh, let's just talk about the behavior. Not at all. Where it comes from is a direct continuation of this. And the 6th chapter is about the father of psychology. That's such an obvious question. It's likely to be on many tests. Maybe not ours because it's just too obvious. It's like, you know, 60-pound Robin fat, I don't know. Who's the father of psychology? Wilhelm Wundt, right? Everybody should know that. It's, again, you'd be surprised. I'm sure somebody didn't know that before this class. And there's even graduate students. They say, well, wasn't it Freud or Dr. Phil? That we're actually allowed to hit the students if they say that. That's how bad that is. Wundt is the father of psychology. Now, of course, again, and we'll talk in subsequent chapters about other people who are doing things similar to him. But he's given that title because of what he did. When you get in there and read about him, the first section, like in all of the chapters, is about biography. Tells you a little bit about him. Little skinny, wimpy kid. Everybody picked on him. He wasn't too good in school. Things didn't go well. He loved to daydream, and it's a great story. I love it. I always read this to my kids at the dinner table. He's sitting in high school, and he's daydreaming, and his father is like watching, you know. I've done that to my kids, going to school and watching, you know. And little Wilhelm is just like sitting there. Father charges in the room, smacks him in the head, you know, and that was back in the days where you didn't worry about embarrassing your kids. So he wasn't a great student, that's the point. Actually, there's another little lesson in this, too. I think this is true about a lot of students. Like, if you're not a good student or your kid is not doing so good, you know, you can try a lot of things, but I'll tell you, the thing that usually works is changing the whole situation. Pull up the kid out, put him somewhere else, because probably there's so many things that are screwing things up. Well, that's what happened with little Wilhelm. His parents took him out. They sent him off with his aunt and his uncle, and he had a brother who was living and studying with them. And everything changed. He got much better. He really got into school. He had the brother who served as a bit of a role model. And he also went to, like, from a small town where there were a lot of these bullies who were picking on him to a bigger city. And he found there were some people that were interested in the same stuff he was interested in. And all of a sudden, school got much, much better. He wasn't an A student like Descartes or some of those others because he didn't get scholarship money, but he did work his way through. And he ended up earning a medical degree. But of course never practiced medicine. He was primarily interested in research, in physiology, and studying the body, and that's really where he starts from. So he comes from physiology. Guess where he worked? He wrote a paper that Mueller published in his journal, and Mueller knew him. And Mueller sent him to work with Helmholtz, and he was working with Helmholtz. So all this stuff is connected. Nobody's coming out of left field saying, I got a great idea. They're responding to the people before them. Famous saying that when you make a great accomplishment, when you do that, you stand on the shoulders of giants.